Hello and welcome back to your favourite educational podcast, where it's hot outside. At a time so climatically volatile and perilous as this, I believe it appropriate to share with you a short haiku I wrote. Public health advice. Stay safe during a heat wave. It's cool to be cool. Being cool is the sum of its counterparts, looking cool and feeling cool. And in today's episode, as the Northern Hemisphere dwellers reach the middle of summer, I would like to say I firstly recognise that I'm a little bit off schedule, what with the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland experiencing a 35-degree heat wave this year in spring. That is spring of drip, drip, drop little April showers, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and for anyone who uses Fahrenheit who does not understand the temperature at which water boils and freezes, on that day, England was hotter than Egypt, Algeria and Libya, where you might find the Sahara Desert. With all this reason to become educated in the art, philosophy and physics of dressing to survive the biblical intensity of the impending summer, you are all starting to watch the summer episode I made last year. Nevertheless, I find one of the benefits of having a glass half empty pessimism is that you are never disappointed. I say this because one of you decided to ruin the fun for everyone and rat me out to YouTube. For whatever reason, I'm not really sure what possible problem you could have with my podcast, but alas, YouTube restricted my video and demonetized it, and then when I had the audacity to ask why, apparently a human checked it and decided it was incredibly offensive and could not be seen on the internet, and removed it. So that's gone, but don't worry, I'm never disappointed. My expectations were just met. However, we are now left with a gap in the syllabus that I feel it is my duty to fill. As such, we gather here today to impart knowledge on one another, as we do best on this channel. So never fear, watch this much better video on how to be cool during the balmy summer of 2026. And I will leave out the part about how to waterboard yourself, just in case.
Oh. That's it, I'm not going.
Part 1. How to look cool. When it is hot, we sweat. Sweat evaporates off your skin to keep you cool. I think now more than ever people have somewhat of a grasp of how this cools us down, as it is impossible not to have a conversation with someone without debating the ethics and concerns of AI. And rather than taking the time to understand how our own body works, we seem to only now be realising that water can be used to cool stuff. And even then, I still believe there's some way to go from realising to understanding, because AI is still being aggressively debated on its water usage. But never fear, this is absolutely not a conversation about AI, but for those of you who like to fight strangers on the internet for using ChatGPT based on an internet analogy, imagine you are ChatGPT. Heaven forbid. And sweat is the 2 bottles of water needed to cool you down after responding to a prompt. You may think at this point I'm being facetious, which there's no change whatsoever. But the reason why I say I don't believe the internet truly understands sweating is because I'm finding that right now, the focus of a lot of beauty, health and wellness content is advice and product recommendations on how to stop sweating.
This is a hygiene tip for all the sweaty girls and guys out there. You need to get yourself this £7 product. It's called Dry Claw and it's basically an anti-perspirant solution. If you are someone who sweats a lot, this is a lifesaver. You can use this for sweaty hands, sweaty feet, sweaty pits. Apply it to dry skin and it will stop you from sweating for days.
There is a current surge of content from dermatologists and other medical doctors recommending medical grade antiperspirants to stop you from sweating. And the comment sections are filled with people saying, oh, this doesn't work and also my skin is peeling off. And that's because you see the doctor when you are sick, not when you are hot. Remember, there is a 35-degree heat wave going on outside. If you sweat when you are hot, you are not sick. You are hot. This is not for you. And before you say, yeah, well, I have hyperhidrosis, actually, fine. I approve this message. If you are actually sick, of course this is appropriate. If you have hyperhidrosis, see a doctor. Do not try stuff from the pharmacy department of TikTok shop. Anyway, at the same time, the other side of the internet is saying,
everyone sweats. Embrace the beauty of the natural human body.
Understanding that you sweat when you're hot, but neglecting the idea that natural doesn't necessarily mean beautiful. Pooping is natural. Everyone poops. Except me, because that's disgusting. But there's a reason why toilet cubicles have doors on them. Once you get over yourself and realise you do not need to poop with the door open just to prove a point, and you do not have a medical condition, it's just hot outside, you can watch the rest of this video and we can begin to consider what course of action to take when trying to be cool. When you sweat, the colour of your shirt darkens if your sweat touches your shirt before it has time to evaporate off your skin. The academic term for this, I believe, is a pit stain. Assuming this is true, the simplest method, of course, to combat this is to wear a shirt that doesn't touch your pit skin. By doing this, you stay cool in two ways. You look cool, being pit stain free, and you also feel cool because your sweat actually has the opportunity to evaporate off your skin rather than soak into the fabric of your shirt. Fashion choices you might want to consider if this is a method of being cool you wish to adhere to include, but are not limited to, the spaghetti strap, the halter neck, the muscle tank, and the oversized t-shirt where the sleeve seam sits below your armpit. Let me, for example, can you see this seam here? If this is sitting, you can see that if it's sitting below where your armpit is, that's not going to touch the bit that gets sweaty anyway. I mean, I don't sweat because I'm a lady, but if these are fashion choices that you do not feel you resonate with, please continue to listen. Let's assume you are not wearing one of the aforementioned items of clothing and you sweat into your shirt. When you sweat, your clothes get darker because a wet t-shirt absorbs more light than a dry t-shirt. When fabric is dry, the air fills the gaps between fibres. When wet, water displaces the air. Water has a refractive index closer to that of the fabric fibres than air does, so light bends more gently between water and the shirt than between air and shirt, so more light is absorbed. And if more light is absorbed, by definition less light is reflected, so you see a darker colour. With this in mind, it stands to reason that black is going to be the best colour for concealing sweat stains, because you can't get darker than black. Black absorbs a lot of light anyway. A dry black t-shirt and a wet black t-shirt are going to have very little perceivable visual difference. Black getting darker is still black. And I think this is a good time to mention that if you believe that black is necessarily hotter than wearing white, you may have been led to believe some incomplete science. You've probably heard that wearing white keeps you cool because it reflects light, which it does. White is better at reflecting sunlight than black, which is why when you touch a black t-shirt out in the sun, it feels hotter to the touch than a white t-shirt sitting out in the sun. But what we are missing when we conduct this kind of experiment is that we would be wearing this t-shirt. And if we consider this, we cannot discount the way our body interacts with change in temperature, and also the heat coming from our cells. The sun is hotter, I agree, but it's also very far away.
Okay, one last time.
What we're forgetting when we suggest that white clothing keeps us cooler is that the vast majority of radiant heat transfer happens within the infrared region of the electromagnetic spectrum, which has nothing to do with the colour of your shirt. So in reality, the colour of your shirt, white or black, isn't the defining feature as to whether that shirt is going to keep you cool or not. So don't be scared to wear black in the summer. A study published in 1980 followed a man in robes that he had purchased from the indigenous Bedouin people that lived there. The question they were asking was, why would the Bedouins, who have lived in the desert for millennia, so kind of knew what they were doing by 1980, why would they wear black robes when we know that black absorbs more solar radiation than white? What they found was true. Black robes did absorb more solar radiation than white. The black robes themselves were hotter than the white robes, but the higher surface temperature produced greater convective heat loss, allowing the additional heat to dissipate before it reached the man underneath, and as such, the black robes and white robes showed no statistical difference in how hot they made the man. The study concluded with the explanation that the loose construction and ventilation of a garment can counteract the greater solar absorption of dark fabric by facilitating convection. So applying this to our situation in 2026, the colour of your shirt is far less important than what popular scientific rhetoric might suggest.
Bright colors reflect sunlight and will get less hot than dark colors. So it makes sense to go for beige, white, just brighter colors in general.
If the study were reproduced today, they could just follow a freelance creative around Hackney wearing a cuckoo intimate skirt and Havianas.
Here are things that I find so incredibly chic. All of these are very niche.
But yeah, that's how you don't stink. Comment down below if you have your own tips and follow for more.
So now that we have established that the colour of your clothing doesn't really matter in terms of thermodynamics, I would like to suggest to you a way of dressing that draws on the principles of camouflage. As we now know, sweating makes your clothes darker. Sweating through your shirt results in a recognisable pattern. I will represent this with a circle. This is very easy to see on, for example, a block-coloured t-shirt. We have a uniform colour of the shirt and we have a uniform shape of the stain. Our visual system is very sensitive to edges and contrast, which we use to identify objects, and camouflage works to exploit this. An evolutionary mechanism of camouflage, known as disruptive coloration, hides animals in plain sight by confusing the visual field. Instead of uniformly blending into the background by being the same colour as its surroundings, the animal will have high contrast spots, stripes, or patterns to break up the true outline and create false edges. In nature, this can be used to confuse a predator's visual system, allowing the prey to hide in plain sight. If we bring it back to the topic at hand, Pit stains are our prey. We want them to be concealed as well as the toilet door conceals the pooping man. Our solution? A patterned shirt. Here we have a fabric consisting of one colour. When I darken this with our sweat here, you'd be hard not to notice it. Here we have a patterned fabric. When I darken this with sweat, you can see that it is comparatively very discreet. Furthermore, in this patterned fabric, the pattern is quite highly contrasting with itself. This draws attention away from the gentler contrast between the sweaty colour and the non-sweaty colour. Allow me to reiterate with these t-shirts. Here on the left, we have a solid colour t-shirt, and here on the right, we have a patterned t-shirt. Here you can see that the pit stain is concealed in the two ways we have discussed. The dark colours conceal the sweat more on the right, as they absorb more light when dry, so there is less visual contrast when wet. And also, the pattern conceals the sweat more on the right, as it disrupts perceived visual edge of our pit stain. In conclusion, the shirt optimised for concealing sweat is a dark patterned shirt. Part 2. How to feel cool. Being cool in the heat may actually prevent you from having to worry about the entirety of Part 1 at all, which is why it came before Part 2, so I could force you to watch it before you realised it was potentially superfluous information. If you make clothing choices that keep you cool, you won't even get to the stage of sweating through your clothes. And this is why it's important to read the whole recipe before you start cooking. Consider this section to be the preventative measure to be put in place so that individuals are less likely to require treatment, which in this analogy is Part 1.
May I note that this is no excuse not to be wearing an antiperspirant. We are in fact treating the symptoms, not the cause. And some of you forget that.
So how do we keep ourselves cool enough that we do not steam ourselves under our clothes? If we go back to our study on Bedouin robes, the colour was statistically irrelevant. What kept the Bedouins cool was the architecture of their clothing. Their robes allowed what the human body is designed to do when it gets hot. Believe it or not, we did not emerge from Eve's womb wearing Havianas and slip skirts.
Here are things that I find so incredibly chic.
In the scheme of forever, we have spent a relatively short amount of time wearing clothes at all, so the way we have adapted to heat is based on us being naked. But as we have already discussed, nature does not necessarily mean beautiful, so please do not walk around crack to the wind, because that's not what I'm saying. In fact, what I'm saying is that you want to facilitate the body's natural response to being too hot. For optimum homeostatic performance, wear something light and airy where there is room between your body and your clothes, so sweat can evaporate off your skin and not onto your clothing, making it all wet and trying to dry out from there, which is going to take substantially longer and be far less beneficial. The study on Bedouin robes suggested that clothing acted like a chimney, allowing excess heat from the sun-exposed robes to dissipate into the space between the body and the robes and funnel upwards and outwards. But regardless of how it happened, this is not what the study was investigating. The skin temperature of the man in both the black robes and the white robes was less than the temperature on the surface of the robes, suggesting that heat must have gone somewhere other than to the man himself. So now we understand the fit, what about the material? You have two options: synthetic fibres or natural fibres. The conversation surrounding polyester clothing is rather a hot topic at the moment. Everyone is scared about eating their lululemon leggings, but as I'm sure you've heard every crude oil salesman or intentionally contrary video essayist say, actually it's more nuanced than that. And I think that honestly it was the whole lululemon controversy that kind of sparked this whole topic of discussion, because the polyester is bad for the planet rhetoric was kind of getting a bit tired. No one cared anymore. But I really am not going to dwell on the ethics of the fashion industry in this video about armpits. It requires a lot more conversation, but as you are my children who I love so dearly, if you do wish to hear a whole video on materials and the sustainability and ethics of different materials, clothing materials, I can do a whole video on it. I just don't want to cram it all in now. But to provide you with a very short commentary, in case you haven't heard, Lululemon is getting a lot of attention at the moment over the use of forever chemicals, which is the user-friendly name for PFAS, which is synthetic substances that don't break down easily in natural conditions. I don't know if you've seen any stories like this. From what I can see, in order to run a viral story, you have to convince the vulnerable people of the internet that they are Chernobyl victims. In April of this year, an investigation was opened into whether Lululemon failed to disclose the potential presence of PFAS in its clothing. Lululemon is saying that they don't use them and that they phased PFAS out of their clothing during the 2023 financial year, and they were eliminated by 2024. What does this mean? 1. This is only an investigation. It is currently publicly unresolved. 2. The investigation is over whether consumers are being misled by environmentally friendly marketing, not over whether the use of these chemicals can kill you. It's a marketing issue, it's not a health and safety issue. And 3, the investigation is into whether Lululemon has PFAS in their clothing in 2026, when they have stated they were eliminated by 2024. They used them in 2023, but that's not their problem. That's your problem for being a customer of Lululemon in 2023. I personally believe we're being misled about the actual situation. PFAS are synthetic substances used in clothing and activewear because they are water and oil repellent. So you know what else has them? Your Arc'teryx jacket, and basically every other waterproof piece of clothing you own for repelling rain, and the majority of activewear for repelling sweat. And even if you stopped wearing your raincoats and your activewear, it's in your non-stick pans, which you literally cook your food in. And this is not some scandal. If you actually cared enough, this is very readily available information. But for some reason, people are more concerned about how they are somehow absorbing PFAS through their Lululemon leggings than literally eating them. And again, without wanting to be the crude oil salesman, I'm not saying that PFAS aren't bad, but honestly, I don't think they are bad in the way that media has led you to believe. Personally, I think it's all going to be a massive marketing technique from the fashion industry, because it allows them to tap into the wellness industry, which is worth considerably more. I got my head bitten off a little bit when I started saying that anti-AI marketing is going to be a thing. My evidence pointed to when all the girls started saying, this is why we all shop at Opoly, because there was a viral video on them not using AI for how products are being modelled on their website. And what went viral was here's the proof that we do not use AI video, and suddenly you get an online fast fashion retailer being praised for saving the planet by not using water. And I truly believe the same thing is going to happen here. It's fear-mongering, tapping into our obsession with health and wellness, and the fashion industry are going to use it to sell you stuff you do not need. Tale as old as time. People care far more about themselves than they do about the planet, which is why I believe PFAS are being branded as a health concern rather than an environmental concern. And people care more about themselves than they do about other people, which is why PFAS are being branded as a health concern rather than an ethics concern. In reality, the people whose health is most likely to be affected by PFAS are the garment workers making your clothes. Sustainable fashion marketing isn't profitable anymore because no one cares, and because no one cares, the bar for fashion brands to be considered sustainable is so incredibly low. For example, H&M are considered a global leader in sustainability in fashion, and that sounds great, but for a fast fashion company to be receiving accolades over their sustainability, the competition must only be comparable to being the fastest snail at the 100-metre sprint. Took 2 days, but Gary is the world champion. You know? It's all frankly ridiculous to think that big fast fashion brands care about anything other than making money. They will just pile onto the latest trend, making internet people most irate. Opoly being praised for saving the planet and creatives' jobs by not using AI as a fast fashion online retailer, with garment workers paid minimum wage in Bangladesh and China. John Galliano for his Zara collaboration, saying they are creatively sustainable. What he meant was that he's taking inspiration from his old designs and using them in new designs. We are really pulling at straws here. And not the ones out of turtles' noses. Sustainable is just too much of a semantically charged word to be used here. Brands don't actually have to do anything because being transparent is considered sustainable, and therefore by extension ethical. Which is the same as saying, yeah, it's okay to kill someone as long as you tell them first. Which is what the whole Lululemon controversy is about. It isn't about whether Lululemon's practices are harmful to the environment, labourers, or even to ourselves, which everyone has been led to believe. It's actually about Lululemon using eco-friendly marketing and whether customers were misled because they have no critical thinking ability or autonomy to research. We need to stop acting like transparency is the same thing as actually doing something, but also acting like chemicals are necessarily bad. I was watching some debate the other day about fluoride in water, and it was some conspiracy theorist talking to a doctor about the government putting chemicals in the water, and the doctor was like,
Yeah, we put chemicals in the water.
And the girl was like,
Gotcha.
And he was like,
To prevent tooth decay. And you know what else we put in the water? Chlorine.
And the girl was like, oh my gosh, you mean chlorine? That toxic yellow gas that you mix with some other shit and put in bleach to clean out toilets, that has those little symbols on the back saying they'll kill you and you will die if you drink it. in our drinking water. And he was like, yes, that chlorine. We put it in the drinking water because it kills bacteria that would kill you if you didn't kill them first. The millions of infants in developing countries aren't quite so lucky. Sometimes chemicals are good. But anyway, this is so far off topic. But consider all this a disclaimer when I say synthetic clothing can be good at keeping you cool. You cannot conflate bad for the planet with functionally inept. Being bad for the planet doesn't make it bad at everything. You can consider what you personally find more important, but one does not necessarily imply the other. If polyester clothing is designed for performance, it's going to be good at keeping you cool. For example, technical clothing can be engineered to wick away sweat. The synthetic fibers will spread the sweat across the surface rather than being absorbed, and this will allow the sweat to evaporate. Whereas something like a cotton t-shirt will soak up that sweat and will just make you all wet. With this in mind, if you want the thing that's going to best keep you cool, go for specialized tech wear, which I'm sure I don't need to insult your intelligence by saying is not the same as 100% polyester from Shein. However, if you do want a natural fibre, personally I actually find it nicer to wear cotton. I actually like the feel of cotton way better than any other material. But if you think I don't look like I go to the gym, you would be correct. So I don't own any gym leggings or anything from Lululemon, but my absolute favourite Child the Hanes beefy t-shirt, which I'm actually currently wearing one right now. Can you see that? It's a Christmas t-shirt. A heavyweight cotton t-shirt isn't going to be fantastic in the heat. If you sweat, it's going to absorb it rather than wick it away, and it's just going to get heavier and wetter. Unless, as I say, you have this seam here below your armpit, and then it's just not touching the wet part of your skin. Part 1. But if you choose something like gauze cotton, which is a lighter fabric with a looser weave, it's going to be a much better cotton option. Linen is also a very popular choice in the summer. Linen fabrics conduct heat away from the skin relatively quickly, so linen often feels cool to the touch, and whilst it does absorb moisture, it releases it more readily than cotton. But if I say anything more on the topic, I am scared that we will fall out. In conclusion, buy a robe from a Bedouin desert dweller. And that is everything I have time for today. I really hope you enjoyed that video. Do stay safe in the sun. Ciao, adios, happy holidays. Love you. Bye bye. I'm melting.
Oh. Ah. That's it, I'm not going.